All right, so the next step we need to do is going to be to add a background and then also clean up the edges of our creature here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead, insert a photo, and I'm just going to take this photo of a jungle here, okay? And I'm going to blow it up, and we're going to make sure that this is on, well, first let's do this. Let's make sure it's on the lowest layer here because it's going to be our background behind everything else, okay? And we're going to blow this up. Now, there's a few things I want to think about here, okay? One is going to be the contrast, right? We want this creature to stand out against its background, okay? And in order to do that, we need to make sure that there's not anything behind it that's going to become too distracting, right? So right off the bat, what I'm going to go ahead and do is Gaussian blur this whole entire layer, and it will help make it look like it's out of focus, okay? Now you can see there's a couple things I did here. Over here on the right, I'm going to make a new layer so I can draw and point to you what I'm talking about. So over here on the right side of the image, what I did was make sure that this whole area here was really dark because I wanted it to contrast against the rim lighting we did right here so it will show up brighter, right? So all of this I did pretty dark, okay? And there's this line of darkness that goes along here that contrasts with his face so that we can really see and get a clear image of the outline and the silhouette, okay? Now what I want to do also is adjust the hue and saturation and color because the thing is we want the lighting that we did on our creature to match the lighting in the scene, and right now the lighting on our background looks really cool and really dark, and we need to feel a little bit more warm, okay? So what we can do is go ahead and adjust this slider here until we get somewhere. Let's make sure we're on the right layer. Down here, this is what we want. We can adjust this slider to bring it a little bit more into the warm realm right there, okay? Then I'm going to lower the saturation as well just a little bit so it's not quite so in your face. We don't want it to be the focal point. Then what I can do, if I come here to curves and I want to just lower the contrast overall, I can bring the brights down. So the brightest brights will be a little bit darker and the darkest darks will be a little bit lighter if we adjust this one down here, okay? Just so there's not as much contrast. So we want it to fade into the background. So next what we can do is, in order to kind of balance that out because it looks a little bit too like light now, a little bit faded, what we can do is darken the brightness and up the saturation just a little bit, okay? And that will give us a pretty good sense of what we're looking for, okay? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here with a new layer, set this to overlay, and I'm going to come in here manually and adjust some of this stuff, okay? So let's see, I'm going to get a nice big soft airbrush and I'm going to pick a dark blue sort of color, and because this side over here is where this sort of blue light is coming from, I want there to be a little bit of a blue cast to it, okay? And then just darken up some of these areas as well where I really want there to be some contrast showing through, okay? Then we'll come up here and pick a nice orange color and lighten up some of the areas over here on the opposite side. Okay, bring them a little bit warmer. Okay, and then we can adjust that, turn it on and off to find the balance we want. So right now, I think that looks good. Okay, now what we need to do, okay, so I went ahead and duplicated the image, and on mine I merged my overlay and my background layer together, but when I try and merge these together, it's giving me problems for some reason. I haven't been able to figure out why. Normally it doesn't do this, so I had to do a little bit of a workaround. So what I'm going to do is turn off the background layer and the background color all together so we just have this shape. Then what I can go ahead and do is save this as a PNG, which will save it with a transparent background, and I'll just save it to my photos, okay? Then if I come over here and I insert a photo, I can insert everything but the background on its own separate layer and preserve everything. So I'll show you what I mean. For example, if I merge all these back together and we turn it on and off, that's the difference. Some of the shadows weren't getting all the way dark for some reason. and I couldn't quite figure out why. So that's one way to work around it. If it works for you, just merge them all together. Normally it does. I'm not sure why it was doing that, but it was. So anyways, now we have this background layer here. And what we're going to do, we can turn that back on. And we want to come around with our eraser tool. I'm going to get a medium brush eraser tool. And we're just going to clean up the edges on this so that we can get it ready to go add the textures, right? So there's some areas, for example, where maybe it's just not quite, clean, crisp line. And you don't want it to be too clean and too crisp, which is why I'm using a medium airbrush. If you do it too crisp, it's going to look fake. Okay? So you do want to make sure you're doing that. And you can see I'm not quite making it a perfectly straight, smooth line. It's a little bit broken up in areas. Okay? Just making sure that everything is all, like you can see here, some of the patterns were starting to go outside the lines. Now, you can do this, you can prevent all of this by just creating either a layer mask or, making sure you don't go outside the lines by selecting the shape whenever you paint. However, for this style, I like to make sure that everything looks nice and organic. And sometimes when you do that, it can get a little bit too crisp on the edges and start to look fake. So that's why I didn't do that, and I'm just going back now to clean it up and erase it. Now a lot of this isn't that big of a deal because we're going to end up going back anyways and using our blur tool to kind of blur it out of focus. But nevertheless, it's important to pay attention to the details, and we're not quite sure where we're going to be blurring yet, so it's best to make sure everything is nice and crisp just in case we decide to keep it that way. Okay. Get our brush size down nice and small so we can get in here and get all these shapes. Like these claws, for example. Make sure those are feeling nice and crisp with that highlight sitting there right on top. Okay. This side looks pretty good. Got some areas right here we need to clean up just a little bit. For the most part though, it's looking pretty good. Let's get the tail here. Come up that brush size some. Okay. Excellent. And I'm going to come in here as well and open that up a little bit. Okay, and we're still going to come back, by the way, and do his eyes and his horns and claws and stuff on a separate layer. So don't think we forgot about those. We're just going to wait till we put the texture on first so we don't have to paint it over twice. Alright, there we go. So that looks pretty good. I think it's nice and clean, crisp edges. We can turn it on and off and see just the background and just the painting. So you can see it's really starting to come together now, and now we get to add some of the final finishing touches that are really going to bring this to life. So I'll see you guys in the next lecture.